Thanks for joining us today. Just letting everyone load into the room at the moment, and then we'll begin the presentation. Thank you. So thank you for joining us for today's webinar on an introduction to the WELL Building Standard. My name is Michelle. I'm the CPD coordinator here at the Society. We're joined today by Mona Holtcutter, who is a manager on the Market Solutions team with IWBI. Mona is a chartered engineer and also holds WELL AP, Lead AP in Building Design and Construction and Home Performance Index Assessor qualifications. Mona is keen to support the European market to design sustainable and health-focused buildings and communities. So I'll hand over to Mona now, who's going to talk us through the WELL Building Standard.
Thanks, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone on the line. I'm delighted to have the opportunity today to present to you about the WELL Building Standard. I really hope you had at least 5 or 10 minutes today to enjoy some of the glorious sunshine. With that, I'll see if I can forward this on. Quick introduction of myself. Michelle touched upon it as well. I am working for the International WELL Building Institute. That's the company that basically invented and is managing the WELL Building Standard. I'm part of the European team. I'm based here in Dublin, Ireland. So you have a local contact if you have any questions after the presentation. I am based in Dublin. And with this, I would love to start our presentation with a quick polling question to find out what your knowledge about WELL is. So I'd love to see if you've heard about WELL before, and have you heard about WELL before? Not at all, or yes, but you're not really sure what it's about, or yes, you're quite familiar with it. So I'm curious to hear your WELL experience before I start.
I'll just give people a few more seconds to vote in the poll there. Okay, I think most people have voted now, Mona, so I'll end the polling and share the results if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks. Perfect. So that's very interesting. So 30% have not heard really about WELL before, and most of you have, but not really in detail, and a few maybe experts on the line. So the 4 of you, bear with me. I'm going to give an introduction about what WELL is and the different concepts and different ideas behind the concepts. And I hope even for the 4 of you, there's some interesting ideas that you can learn from this. So I don't know if we can close this and then I'll move on. Perfect. So with this, I'll dive straight into it. I'm starting to have a look at why we're talking about health and well-being in relation to real estate in the first place. And I think the focus on this has probably shifted quite a bit in the last few months with the COVID-19 pandemic that we're all facing at the moment. But in this presentation, I'm covering aspects kind of pre-coronavirus, but I'll also touch upon some of the aspects of health and well-being in the light of this pandemic. So starting off with having a look at what determines the state of our health. Genetics are only responsible for about 20% of the state of our health, according to research by the World Health Organization and the Center of Disease Control. And the majority of what determines our health is based on the physical and social environment that we live and work in. That means both the built environment, like for example, how our offices are designed, or at the moment our homes, as well as people's income level, living condition, and how we behave. So how active we are, whether we smoke, whether we exercise each day, what we eat. And buildings play a key role in this, because when we, you've probably seen this slide before, a lot of us spend a lot of time indoors. The average is 90% of our time. If you think about this as a figure, if you spend on average 2.4 hours a day of your time outdoors, that means that you're still spending 90% of your time indoors. So the indoor environment is having huge impact on our health and well-being. And this is a post-COVID-19 slide on the business case for health and well-being. I think when we look at the overall cost of a business, we used to look at energy costs, which were comprising around 1%, 9% on rent and operations, and companies would spend around 90% in salary and benefits. We have been really focusing on reducing energy costs in buildings, which has a very, very good reason. We need to reduce energy costs for our carbon footprint to make sure we have a planet to live on for the future generations. So I definitely don't want to argue against that, but if we are talking about looking at it from an investment perspective, there is a much greater benefits you can look at when you tackle the 90% salary and benefits. So when we're looking at things like productivity, reduction of absenteeism, increasing presenteeism, reduction in staff turnover, you really have a business case for having healthy and well building. And some of the costs of poor well-being that we see in companies are things like already mentioned absenteeism and staff turnover, which then again impact on over and understaffing and impacts on client inconveniences, and the list is quite long. Since March, we have now a new aspect to consider when talking about health in buildings. And at IWI, we started an initiative called Places Matter that looks at prevention and preparedness, resilience and recovery from COVID-19 and other respiratory infections. And with this initiative, we have gathered a community of experts that share our task force. We have some really interesting and knowledgeable people. Some I want to highlight. I think on the top row, you can see Cohen, who's the CEO and founder of Edge Technologies, a very forward-thinking and interesting company in the Netherlands. Christina Gamboa, the CEO of the World Green Building Council. Despina is head of occupier business performance at Cushman & Wakefield. And then at the bottom left, you see Dr. Joseph Allen, who is a very interesting professor at Harvard University in the US, looking at the topic of health and healthy buildings in detail. Very interesting person to follow on Twitter in these times, and he also has a book coming out in the next few weeks. The task force has over 500 members across 25 industries and 30 countries who help us to write a set of guidelines which have two goals. I think, first of all, as already mentioned, write a set of guidelines for prevention, preparedness, resilience, and recovery from COVID-19 and similar respiratory infections for the future. And the second goal is to inform changes to enhance the well building standard itself. As you will see in my presentation going forward, there are quite a few aspects that WELL is already addressing in relation to prevention of disease transmission, but we are really focusing with the task force to either further and enhance this. So with this, I'd like to move on to the next section and let's get to know WELL a little bit better. I always like to start off actually defining what I mean by talking about health. When I read this definition by the World Health Organization for the first time, I found it quite powerful. So I'd never really thought about health in such a holistic way, but the World Health Organization actually defines health as a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being, and not just the absence of illness. So keep that in mind, please, for the rest of the presentation. A quick overview about the development of WELL. The WELL building standard itself was first released in 2014 after 6 years of research and expert peer review process. So it's still a relatively early product on the market. In 2017, we released the WELL Community Standard, that is focusing on the spaces between our buildings, the urban planning aspects of communities, and you're probably all familiar with the Cherrywood development in Dublin that is actually targeting WELL Community Standard. In 2018, we released the WELL Building Standard, so back to buildings, in the version 2, which is still in pilot phase. And then in 2019, last year, we released a new program called WELL Portfolio. And with the WELL Portfolio program, we are looking to scale from single asset certification to really looking at how companies can implement health and well-being aspects into their overall building portfolio. But I'm going to talk about a WELL Portfolio and explain this in a little bit more detail towards the end. The WELL Building Standard is addressing design, how buildings are designed, how buildings are operated, and how these aspects of design and operation can impact people's behavior towards a more healthy lifestyle. And the standard itself is split into 10 different concepts, which include air quality, water quality, nourishment, light, movement, thermal comfort, sound, materials, mind, and community. And I would like to go through each of these 10 concepts one by one to give you a really brief and high-level overview about what are some of the ideas behind each of the concepts. I'm going to take a second to pause and take a sip of water. Bear with me. Thanks, lots of talking. Okay, so let's look at the first concept, which is air. In 2014 alone, about 92% of the world's population lived in communities where the ambient outer air quality guidelines didn't meet the requirements set by the World Health Organization. You're probably asking yourself now, what about Ireland? What about Dublin? We are luckily not used to images like this from Dublin. And I've actually found this quite interesting section in the National Clean Air Strategy from the Department of Communications, Climate Action and Environment, which says that in Ireland for 2013, the European Environmental Agency estimates that approximately 1,600 premature deaths were due to fine particulate matters and other air pollutants. In addition, estimates indicate that air pollution has health-related costs in Ireland of over 2 billion per year. In other words, a loss of 382,000 workdays per year. I think these stats are pretty shocking. But when we think about what I've already mentioned at the start of the presentation, we've been we're really good at focusing and knowing the state of our outer air quality. But we spend most of our time indoors and we are breathing most of our air indoors. And unfortunately, studies have shown that levels of common air contaminants can be actually 2 to 5 times higher indoors compared to outdoors, due to a lot of different reasons, lack of ventilation, yet they're confined. So these air contaminants can actually build up indoors. So within the air concept, we really are looking to ensure to select the right type of ventilation system based on your location. So if you have a location of your building that is located close to a lot of outer air pollution, maybe natural ventilation is not the right solution. Maybe we need to look at filtration more, providing optimal filtration, ensuring sufficient ventilation levels. I'm sure you all have been in a sticky meeting room with high CO2 levels, starting to feel sleepy and struggling to concentrate. So really looking at optimal provision of indoor air quality. And one of the biggest aspects is indoor air quality testing. So every WELL certified building will need to undergo performance verification and testing for indoor air quality before it can certify. Another kind of interesting topic, the indoor air quality is and the air transmission of COVID-19 is obviously a huge topic at the moment as well. SIPC, for example, have published guidance to increase ventilation levels where possible at the moment to reduce transmission within buildings. So there's a lot of interesting studies and research going on in this area in terms of COVID-19 as well. The next concept then is materials. I always like to talk about the materials concept right after the air concept, just because they are very interlinked and they tie into each other. The growth of the chemical market, I think it's quite scary, in particular when we consider that for 95% of the chemicals that we use in construction, we really don't know how they impact our health. So what we're trying to do is when we design our buildings, it's really important to ensure that any chemicals that we know are unhealthy for us are not brought into our buildings or removed. So that's starting off with lead, asbestos, PVC and mercury that we know are really harmful for us when buildings are undergoing renovations, but also looking at new materials. So for example, furniture, carpets and paints have volatile organic compounds that are off-gas throughout the first year of installation, and they can be pretty harmful. Some of them are actually carcinogenic. And this is something that's greatly overlooked in our construction industry at the moment. Another feature that sits within the materials section that I possibly would have not highlighted in my previous presentation a few months ago is cleaning products and protocols. This feature will be hugely important once we start reoccupying our buildings again. And the feature is looking at the optimal way on how the building is cleaned, but also what types of chemicals are being used, including the need to use cleaning products that are free from carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reprotoxic substances and do not cause skin or respiratory irritation. It's really important that these factors are considered as well as the longer term implications of using antimicrobial agents. A lot of research done in this area, and it's something that we're quite happy that we've picked up already in the standard. It leads me to the next section. So our next concept is water. In the water concept, we are really addressing a few aspects. One is the hydration, and the other one is access to high quality drinking water. How many glasses of water have you had today? The recommended intake from the Institute of Medicine is 2.7 liters for women and 3.7 liters for men through water from foods and beverages for each day. So I think it's quite a lot. I think I personally struggle to drink that much a day, but it's really, really important. Being dehydrated by just a small percent has shown to impact on cognitive performance. So grab a glass of water. The other aspect then that we're looking at is really the water quality. The water in your building that you drink is typically checked for water quality at the water treatment facility. And I think we're pretty lucky living in Europe that there are a lot of regulations and guidelines around that. But what happens between the distribution system and when it comes out of our tap is mainly unknown. There's also there's a huge possibility for the water to pick up contaminants from fixtures or pathogens are growing in stagnant water in our buildings. So as part of the requirements of every well-certified building, it's mandatory to test the water quality at the drinking water tap, where you can really ensure that the water is to the highest quality. Another feature that I might have not highlighted in this presentation a few months ago is our feature around hand washing requirements. The Center of Disease Control and most other recommend washing our hands with regular soap and water at the moment, and not using only using hand sanitizers if soap and water are not available. But the hand washing feature in WELL is addressing the type of soap that's allowed to be used in buildings, but also the requirements of sinks and the sink sizes, so that the sink is big enough that the water column is high enough that when you wash your hands, you're actually not touching the surface of the sink, and you're not transferring any bacteria or viruses. With this, I will move on to our next concept. Next concept is nourishment, and the nourishment concept applies to our building as soon as there's a food offer. So this can be either a canteen or cafe in a building, or even simply the vending machine at reception. So as soon as there's a food offer, our nourishment concept applies. Another shocking stat from the World Health Organization: over half of the world's adult population is either overweight or obese, and poor nutrition is one of the major contributors to preventable chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and obesity. In the nourishment concept, we are focusing on limiting unhealthy foods and making the healthy option the easy option. Features cover the provision of fruits and vegetables, transparency on what the nutrition of the food is that you're being offered, restricting unhealthy ingredients, in particular sugar, and managing portion sizes. Nourishment also really plays a key role in boosting our immune system, which we just learned gained so much more importance in the last few months. With this, I'll move over to our next concept, light. Our eyes do more than just see. In addition to the rods and cones that we have in our eyes that allow us to see in light and in darkness, we have found out that there's other receptors that use light as an indicator to regulate our internal body clock. And this is also called our circadian rhythm. You've probably heard the term circadian rhythm or circadian lighting before. And when we think about how we as humans have evolved over the last 80 million years from primates, we've spent our evolutionary time really exposed to daylight. And does anyone know when the light bulb was invented? I know you can't answer, but think about it for a second. The electrical light bulb was invented by Mr. Edison in 1879, which was 140 years ago. It's estimated that artificial lighting was really readily available in most buildings only about 60 years ago. So if we plot this on a timeline, we as humans have spent about 80 million years being exposed to daylight and daylight only. And only in the last 60 years, we have really shifted to being exposed to artificial light for most of our time. So the question is really how does it impact us, considering that we've only recently found out that lighting is actually impacting our circadian rhythm, and how are we going to design buildings in future with this knowledge in hand? And the obvious question is maximize daylight in our buildings. There have been incredible studies that show the positive effect of daylight on our health. So maximizing daylight is something that we really focus on. The next concept then is movement. In the movement concept, we are looking how buildings can support and enhance an active lifestyle. So this can start from providing showers and bike parking to allow for active commuting to an office, for example, through a proper ergonomic setup, through to the design of your circulation system within a building. Does the building design support the usage of the stairs, or the stairs hidden at the back of the building and everyone is using the lift? I think that there's another really interesting question about how we'll be using lifts once we start going back to our offices, and I think the stair cores will definitely become more important, more busy, which is good for our health. Some silver linings. Moving on to thermal comfort. I won't spend too much time on thermal comfort. It's really focusing on optimal design and operation of our HVAC system, in addition to catering for temperature differences, because not everyone of us feels comfortable at the same temperature. It's an important aspect to get right, as offices that are too hot or too cold have shown to cause a drop in productivity in up to 9%. Important aspect here again is to measure thermal comfort once the project is completed to ensure that the design is actually working on site. Leads me to the next concept, sound. Similar to thermal comfort, we won't spend too much time on it. We're really focusing on optimal acoustic design. You know, if you've ever worked in a noisy environment, you know how much it can impact on our performance when the environment is really noisy and how much stress it can cause. So it's important to look at the way we design our HVAC systems, as well as materials and surfaces, walls, floors, ceilings, to provide an optimal acoustic environment. Our second last concept is mind, and the mind concept is broadly aimed at mental health through policy, program, and design strategies. Some of the design strategies include connection to nature and places that reflect our local culture around them, as well as access to outdoor nature, giving people spaces for restoration and relaxation. On the policy side of things, the mind concept looks at aspects of the work environment that have a really profound impact on people's day-to-day well-being, such as access to mental health services, the establishment of healthy working hours, which impact our work-life balance, which is probably a bit off at the moment. But looking at basic mental health services, such as helping people to quit smoking or substance use education and services. There's a wide range of kind of HR policies and strategies that are covered in the mind section. Studies have shown that people who feel a greater sense of psychological support from their organization also feel a greater attachment to their organization. Which leads me to our last concept, community. Community is a new concept in WELL version 2. And the scope of the concept is really to support health equity and social inclusion by establishing an inclusive community in the project space. So this includes aspects such as health benefits and services promotion, access and engagement, overall establishing a culture of health through incentive programs, and supporting specific needs of different populations in the building. A critical component of this is really understanding those needs, and occupancy surveys are therefore an important part of the community concept. We're also trying to support a variety of different populations through some of the features, such as new parents and new mothers or other caregivers. Another critical strategy is the design for accessibility and universal design. The community concept also includes supporting a wider community engagement outside of your building. And including in the community, we also have a feature which is called emergency preparedness, which is becoming more important right now. And it actually, part of the feature requirements is to be prepared for different emergency situations. And a pandemic like this was actually part of that feature requirement. So really preparing for situations like this as much as possible. With this, I'll move on to our third section and looking into the practical aspects of WELL in a little bit more detail. Just really 2 slides. WELL projects can certify under silver, gold, or platinum level. Each of the projects has minimum requirements that have to be met. So every WELL certified building needs to meet the minimum standards of the health and wellness criteria. But then depending on the optional aspects you add to the project, you can achieve silver, gold, or platinum level. One of the biggest differentiators between, I think, WELL and other certification systems that you might be familiar with is the real focus on on-site performance testing. So every WELL certified building needs to undergo testing for air quality, water quality, lighting, thermal comfort, and acoustic in the building. I now move on to our second last section, which is get to know WELL portfolio. So I want to quickly give you a short overview about our new WELL portfolio program. The program was developed with the help of 35 companies, which were our pilot participants who worked together with us to shape this program. You can see our pilot participants, some of them on the right-hand side of the slide here. And the portfolio program allows companies to scale from single building certification to really applying health and well-being strategies to a wider building portfolio. So it allows companies to incrementally, year after year, improve on health and well-being strategies across the whole set of the assets, the new and the existing buildings. This slide here shows some of the reasons why organizations use WELL, in particular on a portfolio scale level. Some of the main reasons is using it to attract and retain talent, but also aspects like increasing their investment values through GRESB or ESG reporting, and using WELL to support as a tool to support the UN sustainability goals. I want to talk about the last two in a tiny bit more detail. ESG reporting, I'm not sure how familiar you're with it, but ESG reporting, environmental, social and governance reporting. With this, in the ESG, I think the environmental and the governance aspect are relatively defined in the reporting process, but the social aspect isn't really at the moment. And this is where companies like to use WELL certification, and in particular WELL portfolio, to define and report on the social aspects within ESG reporting. On the UN Sustainability Development Goals, not sure again if you have seen this, the UN has set 17 goals for a sustainable and equitable development of everyone on our planet. And WELL features support a lot of these goals, in particular goal number 3, good health and well-being. And with this, I would love to move over to our last section, which is looking at some of our latest stats in adoption of WELL. So worldwide, we have 4,139 registered projects across 61 countries, encompassing 50.6 million square meters. And when we look at the stats in Europe, we have around 1,822 registered projects across 22 countries and covering 11.7 million square feet in Europe. This slide here just shows a few of our early projects that got certified across Europe. On the top left, you can see One Carter Lane, which was the first certified project in Europe. It's over in London, CBR Madrid, Bureau Happold in Warsaw. Bottom left, you can see the Edge Olympic building in Amsterdam, a very, very interesting building. Deloitte, as bottom center, is 1 U Street Square in London. They certified at the end of last year. And Senior is one of the first certified buildings over in France. I'd also love to highlight one of our latest certified buildings in Ireland. This is the Lennox building from Iconic Offices. Achieved WELL Gold certification as of last week. So very, very new news. And with this, I like to finish off by highlighting a new resource that we have published only last week as well. And it's a document that outlines how strategies from the current version of the WELL Building Standard can support the fight against COVID-19. I did touch upon some of the aspects throughout the presentation, but this document really summarizes all of these aspects, and it is freely available for download on our website, wellcertified.com. So with this, I would like to thank you for listening to me. Thank you for hopefully sending in some questions, and I'll open up to Michelle to ask me some of the questions you sent in.
Thank you, Mona, for a really interesting presentation. We have a question here from Roland. So to date, has most interest in WELL certification been received from large property owners or large property users?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Mainly yes, but there's actually quite a good split. I'd say that the main customers would be from Well, actually, not necessarily. Just thinking on the spot, it would be a huge portion, but we've also seen, for example, the likes of Arup in Cork. They've certified their offices. They would probably be kind of more on the consultancy practitioner side. But then we also have a certified hotel. We have a certified school. We are currently looking at education, multifamily residential. So even I've probably touched upon a lot of the offices in terms of the presentation, because the first version was initially designed for offices, but in the second version we've really moved away from that and broadened the applicability of the standard. So we're really focusing, looked at a list early on, so really looking at multifamily residential. We're looking at airports at the moment, a sector really hard hit, industrial warehouses. We have a kindergarten, a school that's certified, co-working spaces, as you've seen, with Iconic, student accommodation, hospitals, social housing, restaurants, gym, retail. So the list is quite long. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I think that like kind of leads in well to the next one, which is what is the uptake of WELL in the Irish market?
So in Ireland, we have 17 registered certified projects at the moment. 3 of them are certified. So Iconic Offices was certified last week, which is in Dublin. The other one in Dublin is iPod's office at St. Stephen's Green. They were certified start of last year. And iPod is another developer that has really really liked the idea of WELL and have registered a lot of their developments, and they were going to walk the talk and look at it for their own office buildings. And then the Arup office down in Cork was the first one in Ireland to certify. If you want to learn more, there's on our website wellcertified.com, if you scroll down to the bottom, you can see a little link to projects, and you can actually see a project directory and filter for different countries. So we filter for Ireland. You can see the different projects that are currently registered in Ireland. Unfortunately, half of them are confidential, so I can't say some of the great names, but you'll find the confidential ones on that page.
You might be able to answer this next one then on that. Stephanie has asked, is it possible to get a virtual tour of the Lennox building, the Iconic office? Is there anything like that available on the website?
That's actually a really good question that I don't know. What I know is that they were planning to give a presentation about their certification and the kind of benefits and cost analysis of the project at the Greenbuild Europe conference. So Greenbuild Europe was supposed to be at the end of March, but got cancelled last minute as everything else. So they're actually moving that the presentations that were planned for that conference online. So their presentation on Iconic's offices and their route to their certification pathway will be available online for free, I think, on the 9th or 16th of June. So in a few weeks that will be available. And if anyone would like to have a link to that, just drop me an email, and I can send that over to you once it's available. I'm not sure if they actually do virtual a virtual tour, but I can check with the WELL consultant Migu from Me and Gireen, who's worked on it, to check in with her.
Brilliant. We have one more question from Christina. She said it can be hard to persuade clients to go for WELL accreditation, particularly when their agents advise there will be no uplift in value. Do you have any research or comparison figures for value of real estate with or without WELL?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have a few case studies that I can send over. I think they're probably kind of two different aspects. You need to consider if it's a real estate developer who leases it out. I think it's impact of increased rent value. So I have a few studies on that I can send over. And then the other, if it's owner occupied or a tenant, I think a lot of the focus is really looking at the things that I mentioned at the start: absenteeism, rate, staff turnover, and really looking at what does that actually cost the company, and how can we manage that. There was a really interesting project in the UK that actually worked together with the health insurance provider to look at what types of claims are they getting as a company, and they could actually really easily identify that they had particularly back issues was the main reason for people being out sick, and they changed their ergonomics, and the cost of absenteeism completely dropped. So I think there's a lot of missed opportunities at the moment that can be looked at. And the first project, the Condell project in London, has done some great studies on their stats, that their figures that they've seen in terms of absenteeism, staff turnover rate. So I can, if you want to drop me an email, I think Michelle, you've probably sent my emails through the chat. So if you want to drop me an email, I can send you the links to the studies.
And we have a question from Tom: is adherence cost neutral, or does it add to the cost of construction?
Another great question. It really depends, I think, from where the project starts. So we have had a few projects that have actually not really had an uplift in terms of construction costs. The certification costs are separate. There are projects that have reported 1.67% was the structure tone office over in New York. The figures that we're getting in that projects are reporting are relatively low, but it probably really depends on the starting point of the project as well, how early is well implemented. The earlier, I think the easier it is to implement some of the requirements. But I also recommend to tune into that presentation from Iconic offices, because I think they're planning to talk about that aspect as well, that the construction costs for their project in terms of well.
I think that's it for the questions. Just had one person ask, will the studies be made available to everyone? But as I said, if you can email Mona requesting those, I've put it in the chat information, so you should be able to get that there. But thank you, Mona. That was a really interesting presentation today. So thank you for your time, and thank you for we had about 90 members joining us today. So thanks to everyone.
Thanks everyone for listening in, and yeah, please feel free to contact me if you have any further questions or anything you'd like to know about well. Enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you, Mona. Bye.
Thanks, Michelle. Bye.